Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and we're going to discuss different categories of nutrition advice. So first of all, I want to say thank you to the patrons of the podcast. So we had somebody reach out and kind of that topic came up. So I just wanted to thank you to those who are supporting the podcast. Sincerely, I appreciate that. And thank you to those who email us and send in requests and topics and just kind of are interactive. I truly appreciate it. It's fun getting to see when people like the videos, like the podcasts, or kind of interact in any way. It's just kind of neat. It's fun to think that this stuff is helpful. Okay, so thank you to those who do that. Now, for today, what we're going to talk about, like we said in the title, was different categories of nutrition advice. I was reading through some advice that a nutritionist was giving in kind of an article recently, and it was really, really, really dangerous advice because the advice didn't really consider all aspects of nutrition. Meaning there is advice that you would give someone in regards to their general health. And when we say that, I'm classifying that as blood work. So you want to help control cholesterol. You want to help control blood sugar, blood pressure. You're trying to just making the person generally healthy. So that is one entire category of nutrition advice that can be incredibly exclusive of advice pertaining to, say, aesthetics. So how lean someone is, how much muscle they have versus how much body fat. So you can talk about weight loss in general health, or you could talk about fat loss when it comes to aesthetics. So weight loss, in general, just means you want to weigh less. And their hope or their assumption is that the less you weigh would be a reduction of body fat. But sometimes the advice given is horrible towards maintaining muscle mass. So the person would actually lose muscle and fat. So they would lose weight, but their aesthetics would not improve, and they would generally most often feel like crap because they're going to go from a fat version of themselves to a less fat version of themselves, but they won't really ever change their shape. So one of the things we'll talk about, you'll hear like me talk about sometimes as well other people, is if you're shaped like a pear, general health advice will get you to a smaller pear, but you're still going to be shaped like a pear. Heavy in the thighs, small on top kind of thing. Now, if you want to change your shape from, say, a pear to an hourglass or a Coca-Cola bottle or whatever the hell kind of imagery you might want to represent, okay? But if you actually want to change your shape, that is a whole different set of advice than general health advice. General health advice is big pear to small pear, but you're always a pear. Aesthetics advice is how you actually change shape. And it is incredibly important that we're aware of that difference because overwhelmingly nutrition advice is given as kind of a general broad base phrase that anyone listening will assume that is for them, and that is absolutely not true. Now, I hope that I do a good job with the podcast of always kind of clarifying who this advice that I give in whatever the podcast is for. I hope that I talk about the aesthetics differences, the performance differences, the general health differences. I hope that I'm doing a good job of separating between those things, but I absolutely could have made mistakes for sure, and I almost guarantee I have. So, and I hope that I can even raise my awareness and become better. But this is something that will even help my own information become more clear. So I don't mean to be picking on just the nutritionist that I had kind of mentioned that I read their advice and it made me think of this. I could very well be making kind of the same mistake sometimes too. So it's good for us in general, myself included, as a person who gives advice, and you guys and girls as people who listen to advice. It's good for us all to be aware that not all advice is created equal. Not all advice is exactly for you. Not all advice has your goals in mind. So there's general health advice. Advice given to us kind of helps us be generally healthy, good blood work, whatever. Okay? Then there's aesthetics advice, which is how can we lose body fat, maintain muscle, how can we look good naked, okay? Then there's performance advice. So how do I perform well? And that could be for a sport athlete, okay, whatever the hell their activity or sport is. And then also performance factors into the quality of aesthetics results you'll get. So aesthetics advice and performance advice aren't entirely different, but they can be different. So sometimes if I'm working with an athlete, I don't really care about their aesthetics much in regards to whatever would be outside of what's best for their performance. So if I have somebody who performs really well at 14% body fat, there's no need for me to make them leaner than that and get down to, say, 10% body fat if that doesn't improve their performance or improve their longevity or improve their life really in any way. So you wouldn't want to place an aesthetics restriction on someone, okay, when it wasn't actually necessary for their performance goals if they're a performance athlete. So, for example, in female swimmers, it's actually better for them to sometimes have body fat on them because they'll kind of glide across the top of the water better than somebody who's very muscle bound and very lean. They'll sometimes sink into the water. So I've actually had female swimmers come and I'll actually give them nutrition advice on how to ensure that they maintain a certain level of body fat. They were actually getting too lean due to the activity level they were doing, and we needed to consume more calories and in certain ways to ensure they didn't get leaner. So sometimes performance advice is not the same as aesthetics advice. However, sometimes they are the same. So it's very important to understand that there's a lot of nuances when it comes to individuals' goals and individuals' types of situations of where they're starting. So just because you want to end in the same place doesn't mean two people will take the same advice. One might be starting from a different place than the other. So where you start matters as much as where you want to end. Then, those are generally the three top ones that I would say in terms of categories of nutritional advice is general health, aesthetics, and performance. However, there is another component to consider, and we kind of relate that to mental health. So there are sometimes advice that is good for aesthetics, but if a person has an eating disordered background, they won't want to take that advice. There are sometimes advice that's really good for performance. But again, if they have an eating disordered background, they might not want to take that advice. And there are an enormous amount of people who give advice on general health that is extremely harmful to mental health and emotional health. So it's important that we recognize that just because something is a good advice for general health doesn't mean you have to do it if it doesn't get you into a healthier mental state. You need to be emotionally healthy, mentally healthy. Then you can become physically healthy. Okay, physical health, whether you have six-pack abs or not, doesn't do shit for emotional and mental health. You'll be amazed, okay? So I've had people who they thought, once they had the perfect bikini body, or if it was a guy, once they had six-pack abs and big arms, that it was going to solve all their problems. Nope. Unfortunately, it does not. So I personally used physical health as a way to improve my mental and emotional health. So when I started lifting weights and working out, I hated who I was. I didn't like the way I looked. I was kind of skinny, fat, no muscle, no strength. Didn't have abs at all. You could grab a roll of fat around my belly, but I had no muscle anywhere either. So I had too much fat and not enough muscle, really any muscle. And I felt like my lack of mental strength, my lack of being disciplined, my lack of just being mentally tough was what partially contributed to my physical state. So I wanted to get into physical exercise, not only to make me look physically better, but also to teach me to be more disciplined and teach me to be a mentally tougher human being. Now, so I used physical conditioning, the act of working out, to improve my mental and emotional health. But it wasn't the results that were dependent on my emotional health and mental health. It was what I did that was the difference. So, for example, it wasn't once I got six-pack abs, I will be happy. It was if I can survive the process and become tough enough to do what it takes to get six-pack abs, that's when I'll be happy. And that's true. So it helped me an enormous amount. But it wasn't the results, it was the process. So there's a little bit of a clarification on that. So when we're looking at this, I picked 3 pieces of advice that came up recently-ish. And I wanted to kind of discuss the pros and cons of the advice, what made it good in certain categories of health, of nutrition, and what made it maybe horrible advice in other categories of nutrition. So let's go through that. So the first one we have is, this was a dietitian, okay? This is advice from a dietitian. And it said, eating breakfast in the morning doesn't help you lose weight. Don't eat in the morning unless you're hungry. And eat a protein-rich breakfast if you are hungry. So, kind of the possible intent of this advice was, it says, eating breakfast in the morning doesn't help you lose weight. Don't eat in the morning unless you're hungry. I think that's the part that they actually really wanted to kind of emphasize, was if you're not hungry, don't eat. And that's a good general kind of rule. So if you're looking for weight loss and you don't feel like you need calories at the moment, but you think you're just supposed to eat, listen to your body. If your body doesn't need the calories, don't eat the calories. So it is true that consuming calories, if you don't need them, is counterproductive towards fat loss. Now, the caveat is there is a too few of calories. So we've talked about that in past podcasts, that you can't just eat nothing, okay? So in podcast 426, we discuss the title of Why Eating Less Isn't Good for Fat Loss. And we've also talked about in podcast 390, titled Proper Nutrition for Sedentary Workers, that even when you're sitting on your butt doing jack crap, okay, and you're not doing anything, your body still needs about 70% of its overall caloric kind of requirements. Where that 30% comes from is like exercise, activity level. So if you're sitting on your butt or if you're walking around the mall, that'll make a little bit of a difference in the calories you need. But in general, you still need calories, okay, even if you're just alive. And if you eat too few of calories, you will not make progress. So I understand the difficulty of the dietitian's position in this piece of advice. Is they're trying to give something that's clear and concise and quick. They can't give something that has all caveats or facets involved. So, for example, she can't say, eating breakfast in the morning doesn't help you lose weight. Don't eat in the morning unless you're hungry. But really do make sure you still eat later in the day. You have to make sure you still eat a lunch, maybe a dinner. You have to still make sure you eat around 70% of your total calories. If you're more active, you can do more than that, but don't go over 100% because you won't lose weight. So it's endless, okay? I understand that process. But there is importance for us to consider that advice we get needs to be put in context with other advice. It needs to be put in context with who's giving the advice, and it needs to be put in context of who we are as an individual, what are our individual needs and circumstances, and what are our goals. So, the general statement of eating breakfast in the morning doesn't help you lose weight. I understand the science of that, in the fact that just because you eat breakfast in the morning, people say, there's a whole bunch of arguments here, and that's why I'm having trouble, and this is probably why she had trouble trying to give advice, does eating breakfast raise your metabolism for the day? There are studies that show if you eat one large lump sum meal a day, that your body will have the same what's called thermic effect of food, which is how many calories you burn to break down the food that you consumed. If you ate all of your calories in one meal versus all of your calories in 10 meals, but it was the exact same types of food, the exact same calories of each individual food. It was the exact same food, just eaten in one meal versus 10 meals. There is no difference in the thermic effect of food. So the amount of calories your body burns to burn those calories, to break that food down and be able to use it, is the exact same. In thermic effect of food, you could argue some variance here and there, but it contributes to about 10% of our overall calories that we burn per day. So just because you ate breakfast, okay, the calories that your body has to burn to break that food down wouldn't be any different than if you were to eat those same calories for lunch. So the time of the day doesn't really matter when it comes to the thermic effect of food concept. However, there's a shitload more to the process of losing weight, and especially fat loss versus overall weight loss, than just thermic effect of food. And then the whole concept of eat a protein-rich breakfast if you're hungry. Protein is how our body fixes and repairs itself. It does maintenance on our body, but it's not a good energy source. So if you were to eat protein only, and she didn't say this, but if you were to eat protein only for breakfast, you're going to feel like shit later on because you have no carbohydrates, no fats, you have no energy, you have no gas in your gas tank. So you got the maintenance and repair style kind of calories, but you don't have any gas in the gas tank kind of calories. So it is important that you eat adequate protein, but you don't want to have protein exclusive. So when they say protein rich, what the hell does that mean? Think about that. So if you say, okay, I want somebody to eat a protein-rich breakfast, what the hell does that? That means nothing. If you ask 10 people what protein-rich breakfast meant, you're going to get 10 different answers. They're all going to hopefully include having more protein, okay? But how much is more? How much is too much? How much is not enough? Nobody knows that shit. Okay, now we have a podcast that'll tell you that, and I've told you guys a million times that we have a podcast that'll tell you that. So it's podcast 33, How Much Protein Do I Need? We talk about 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of lean body weight, 0.6 if you're low active, okay, muscle damage type activity, 1 gram if you're high muscle damage activity. So we know those numbers if we have other context to put with this advice. And that's my point, is when we hear this piece of advice, we have to understand in what context does this apply. Okay, so for general health, this isn't bad advice. Eating less within reason does help you lose weight. So if you don't need the calories at breakfast, don't eat them. Okay, that makes sense. Now, in some individuals, this will cause problems. So if you have an individual who tries to regulate blood sugar management throughout the day, there's going to run into some issues here. If you have somebody who has blood pressure concerns, so if they don't have breakfast and then they go do physical activity, they're going to have low blood pressure, they're going to feel like shit, they might pass out. So if somebody works out on an empty stomach, for example, they'll have a ton of blood pressure concerns and issues, and they won't have a really good workout. So eating in the morning, if you're not hungry, but you're about to exercise, it doesn't matter if you're hungry, eat the damn food anyhow. So we need to understand situational awareness of the advice we're getting. Okay? And then also, this is actually great advice sometimes. I've worked with clients who have Crohn's disease and some other kind of non-specific irritable bowel syndrome type conditions where they want to ease digestive stress. So they might only eat once or twice a day because it's best for their digestive system. Is that best for any other aspect of their health? Not really, probably, but their most concern is ease of digestive stress. So that way they're not on the toilet every hour for the whole damn day, and they have to always have a job where they work from home, or they can never go out with friends. So it really can become a huge hindrance on the quality of their life if they were to have breakfast. Whereas another person, if they have blood sugar management concerns or blood pressure concerns, if they don't eat breakfast, that's going to ruin their life. So it's really important that we understand the advice we get needs to be specific to our needs and our goals. So if your general health goal, there's some pros and cons here and there. What about aesthetics? So if you don't eat breakfast, but you start moving around for the day and start doing things, that'll limit how much muscle mass you can form on your body. So if you are a bodybuilder, male or female, and your concern is trying to get as much muscle on your body, skipping breakfast is a horrible advice. Horrible. Okay? And also, skipping breakfast and then being active creates a caloric deficit that, if it's too great, can lead to intensified cravings and uncontrolled eating later at night. So that also factors into the mental aspect. If you're somebody who struggles with cravings and you struggle with overeating at night, skipping breakfast is a huge factor to why you're having those struggles. So this advice of only eat breakfast if you're hungry, most people wake up late because they hit snooze 400 times. They're in a big rush. They're not going to deem themselves to be hungry. They're not going to deem food to be that important. They're too busy. They got to get to work and they're running late. Then they don't eat enough during the day because they're too damn busy to eat and they're way too damn important to stop what they're doing for 5 minutes. Then they get home at night and realize, holy shit, I've eaten nothing. I'm incredibly, insanely hungry. I have very intense cravings. I'm going to eat everything in the house. Then I'm going to feel guilty about it and repeat the same damn thing the next day. So telling someone to skip breakfast is so damn stupid if they were to have mental challenges in regards to nutrition. Okay? Then what about performance? Like we said, if you active in the middle of the day, whether it's for work or working out, and you don't eat breakfast and you don't fill up your gas tank, what the hell are you running off of? You're going to run off cortisol and stress hormones. You're going to down 1,000,000 milligrams of caffeine, okay, and just run off stress, run off muscle burning. So you're not going to have great muscle mass. You're going to run off of issues. You're going to run into issues with your joints. You're running into sleep issues on how to get to sleep, on how to stay asleep. You'll fall asleep for an hour, then wake up wide awake, and your quality of sleep will be awful. You'll be wrestling around, rolling around. You won't get a great muscle recovery. So this advice of eating breakfast, for some people, can be great advice. And for others, it can be the worst piece of advice they ever got in their life. So this is the stuff that we need to be aware of. When we hear nutrition advice, it doesn't automatically pertain to you. You need to say, who is saying the advice? Okay? What is their education? What's their experience? And then who are they talking to? What is their target audience? What are the target audience's goals? Where are they at? So if you hear somebody talking to people who are brand new to lifting weights and exercising, okay, so New Year's resolutioners, that information is going to come up all the time now in the next month or two. But if you're a seasoned lifter and you're an experienced lifter, okay, and you've done competitions and stuff, that advice you might as well throw away. It's not going to pertain to you very well because hopefully you're already doing that shit. You should be beyond beginner stuff, okay? So you need to say, who is this person talking to, and are they talking to me, okay? So let's give, I have a couple more, but I'm going to run out of way too much time. So let's just go through, the next one we have is, okay, here's one. So studies suggest that frequent weighing, so weighing yourself every day, helps you lose more weight contrary to popular belief, meaning contrary to the belief that you shouldn't weigh yourself. So this piece of advice that another nutritionist, dietitian type person was saying, was you should weigh yourself every day because it's going to help you lose more weight. Okay, is that true? Yes, that's actually true. Because the number is in your face, okay, every damn day. And if the number's going up, you know you need to now start eating less. Okay, now this is less assuming you're already eating where you're supposed to be eating. So if you're already consuming under 70% of your calories, so if you're only eating like 800 calories a day, eating less is not going to be your answer. And overwhelmingly, that's something people need to be aware of, is there is a too few of calories. So once again, if you have not listened to podcast 426, Why Eating Less Isn't Good for Fat Loss, please go listen to that. Because you could be busting your ass, starving every damn day, and actually going backwards. Make your pain worth something, okay? Make your pain worth some progress. So go listen to that podcast, learn more about that. Now, when you weigh yourself, the reason why that works is because every single day you're going to be well aware of your weight. You're going to know kind of where it's like nuances and changes are happening. You're going to know, okay, maybe yesterday I skipped a meal or two, my weight's up a little bit, that's probably water retention. Let me get back on track. All of a sudden my weight drops a pound the next day. Okay? So it lets you start to learn trends based on your behaviors. And the concept of out of sight, out of mind is a huge factor. If you never weigh yourself, you're never really going to know what it is, okay? And small little behaviors here and there that you would normally be aware of if you were to weigh yourself, you won't be aware of because you're not weighing yourself. And you'll be further off the mark before you recognize you're off the mark. So weighing yourself every day keeps it in your mind, and it keeps it regulated at a precision type frequency that you can monitor and not fall too far off track with. Now, what if you have mental health issues in regards to body weight? Then this is horrible advice. You would not want to weigh yourself every day. So I have clients, I've worked with tons of clients with anorexia and bulimia type behaviors and other emotional disorders related to food. For them, weighing themselves became the thing that made them completely psycho and lose track of what they should be doing. So I've talked to a lady one time, I think she was maintaining around 300 calories a day. She had zero body fat left on her, for God's sake. She was in and out of the hospital with fainting, passing out. She was actually starting to have organs shut down because she wasn't eating enough. And when I told her like we started talking and stuff, and I said, what are you weighing? She said she weighed like 80 something pounds. And I said, okay, well, how would you feel if you went from 88 pounds to 90 pounds? She damn near had a panic attack just hearing that question. So when we started working together, we had to throw away everything she had in her house. That was a scale, okay? All of her friends and family needed to be told that she couldn't go on a scale. And she still found ways to go on a damn scale when she'd go to like the YMCA and go to gyms and things like that. And it was one hell of a fight get her to stop looking at that damn number, because she deemed the number to be more important than anything else that was happening. So when the doctor told her your organs are shutting down, she didn't care about that as much as she cared about 1 extra pound being on the scale. Pretty crazy, right? But that's 100% what happens to the mind in situations like that. So I've talked about this in past podcasts. I was anorexic for 3 years. I only ate 1 meal a day, and I made sure I burned off those calories. I did that when I was in my teens. So I'm well aware of what that mindset is. You can handle a shit ton of pain, okay, physical pain, when it's at the expense of mental and emotional pain. Mental and emotional pain will trump physical pain any day of the week. Anybody that says differently, oh man, I'd love to hear your argument. Okay? I'd rather have a broken bone than have depression any day of the week. So when you start working with people and recognizing that emotional stress, emotional factors are what's controlling them, not physical, then you can talk to your blue in the face about a weight scale. But they're never going to change their behaviors because you need to find out what the emotional issue is. So, if you have somebody who has emotional issues related to body weight, telling them to weigh themselves every day is probably not the best place to start. Can they eventually, in a few years or whatever period of time, get to the point where they can weigh themselves and not freak out? Yes, that would actually be a great goal. That would be a great long-term, way down the line goal. But the first place to start with somebody like that is not weigh yourself every day. They're going to freak the hell out. Okay? Now, what about aesthetics? So aesthetics to weigh yourself every day is great because you're going to know exactly what's happening. So I can't gain 3 pounds of muscle in 1 week. So if my body weight goes up 3 pounds in 1 week, I got fat. I did not gain muscle. Okay? So it helps to identify correct rates of weight change for aesthetics. So if I'm trying to build muscle in the off season and I can average about 1/2 pound, okay, which is maybe 2.5 pounds per month, and I can do that for 6 months, that's a pretty damn clean gain. And you're going to have very little fat accumulation with that gain. So that would be something you'd want to measure and mark throughout the time so you can see if you are making the right rate of change and right long-term progress over those course of months. Okay? Now, what about performance? Performance, that's awesome to know because a lot of competitions and things are dealing with weight. So if you participate in a weight class, you need to know how much you weigh. That's pretty common sense. Okay? So that advice of weighing yourself every day might be great for weight loss. It might even be great for weight gain, like we said in the aesthetics population, you're trying to build muscle mass. But it might be the worst piece of advice you gave somebody if they have a mental disorder associated with food. So again, advice we hear, we need to consider what category is it referring to. Is it referring to general health, aesthetics, performance, or mental health? And who is saying it? Okay? What is their formal education? What is their experience? Who are they experienced working with? Is it you? Okay? Are they talking to who you want to be? So if I go to, this is a stupid example, but say I'm a house mom and I want to lose 20, 30 pounds after recently having a baby. So you have you have the baby, okay, 2 or 3 months later, the weight isn't really coming off as much as you'd like, and that's the situation you're in. Are you going to go to a high school wrestler's clinic on nutrition? No, because you're not a high school wrestler. Is some of the information in there going to be good? Probably. Is some of it not going to pertain to you in any way? Yes. But what would be the focus of who they're talking to? High school wrestlers. Are you a high school wrestler? No. So that advice is not for you. So who are they talking to is a question you always want to ask yourself. And then what knowledge are they talking with? So what's their experience and education? So recently, for example, I was sent something where there was a person's resume on the back. And the resume was equivalent to having an associate's degree in nutrition. Everything else on there was not, it was labels of things that made them sound important, but nothing would have required a certain level of education or experience for them to start doing the thing. So, for example, did I have to have any prerequisites to make this podcast? No. I didn't have to know anything about nutrition or training to start this podcast. Now, if I wanted people to continue to listen to it, it would have been helpful, okay, to have some nutrition and training knowledge. But I didn't have to have that to start it. So be careful of who you listen to based on the fact that just because they have something, just because they wrote a book, just because they have a podcast, just because they have a business, okay, just because they call themselves a nutritional coach, you need to see what is the education behind that title. How did they get where they got? And who did they work with to get there? These are all really important things to consider.